1. In 2017, there was an advertisement for a Paracon in a place I had never been to. Of all places, the Penhurst State School and Hospital, located in Spring City, Pennsylvania. I had invited friends along, but only one showed, Holly. Getting there was easy. Simple directions through GPS. At first, I had gotten myself turned around. Thanks to some friendly gents, they pointed me in the right direction. Had to park my infamous orange pumpkin, Hyundai Accent, in a massive grass field. I couldn't see any buildings, just a long flight of steps going towards the top of this rocky hill. Holly arrived soon after I had checked in and received the wristbands for the day. She was excited, as was I, her with a fancy camera and I with my second-hand digital. We ascended the steps towards Penhurst. As we hit the middle above us, we could see a cross on top of what was the administration building. Finally the top, and there she was in all her glory, Penhurst. We walked around the site for some time. I had seen bits and pieces of the Mayflower building, along with the vendors in what seemed like every nook and cranny. We had gone through some of the old rooms, through the woods, a playground. When the wind blew, it was like a stir of echoes, whispers of the past, coming to life so that we as visitors would remember yesteryear and its atrocities. People were going in and out of these rooms quite quickly, capturing nothing but a few specks of dust and a stray beam of light from covered windows. For a moment I thought of how the spirits of these children felt with all of these strangers going in and out of their rooms, not being asked for permission, being demanded to show themselves. These entities are not circus performers, they are not pets. We are meant to learn from their unspoken past, not to act like assholes, but to hold them in the highest regards, something I do in every location. Something drew me downstairs, so as Holly took pictures, I went into this basement and sub-basement area. It was dark and cold, not like the sunny outside from earlier. I had seen chairs that stood like memorial statues along with toys, still somewhat clinging to what happy memories they had seen, now covered in dirt and dust. I took pictures of a few darkened rooms. It almost felt as if something was going to pop out of nowhere and show itself when the flash went off. Nothing. I knew something was there. I saw a room at the end of the hall, pitch black. I went in. There were two individuals taking infrared photos. Once they left, I had the room to myself. Not knowing how long that I'd have this opportunity, I stood alone in the dark, using the power of kind thoughts to see what would happen. Something did. My shirt was tugged numerous times, and it felt like a child held on to two of my fingers. They crowded me because they were afraid of all the strangers. I was patient and kind when speaking to them, like a mother to her own. I said, I know you're scared. This is a place where you are safe, you are okay. I know these people are being rude, but when the lights go out and the people leave, it's your time to play on the swings and to play with the toys left behind. It felt like a big relief came over me. I had more to say to them. You don't have to stay. You may see a beautiful light from where you are. If you go through that light, God is there, and He loves all of us no matter what. He is waiting for us when we go beyond death. In His heaven we are free. There is no pain anymore. Go. Be free from this. I smiled, told them to be safe, and that I would come back to check on them. I felt that some of them may have left in the light of God's love. The ones that remained were so special that they did not understand my message. Some of them are still waiting for Mommy and Daddy to get them. It's hard with kids sometimes, those both living and those who have passed. At least they know that someone can see them, hear them, understand them, and perhaps show them a little love along the way. 2. I live in Russia, and my encounter happened around a year ago in February. I was walking by the embankment at 10 p.m. It was already dark and nobody was around. There is a road which has 3 levels, a big street. Then it goes down to a smaller one, and finally the embankment that turns into the small path through thick snow. Imagine you are walking through an industrial area which barely has streetlights, no people. On your left there is a little forest, and on the right there is a river. So I was walking on the path when I saw a man. His whole appearance alarmed me instantly. He had skis on, but was trying to walk as he was without them. In the deep snow, it was around his knee level. I saw how much effort it took him to not fall and keep moving. There is no way to avoid this person, cause the only tiny path through the snow goes there. And he was staring at me, smiling. Not sure if in the predatory way, but something was weird in that smile. I thought, well, if anything happens, I can push him and run away, and kept moving. When I was right next to him, this happened. Everything took only 3 seconds or so. I was watching his every move with my sight vision, and one moment he disappeared. There is nowhere to hide. The trees are 100 meters away, and hiding in the snow is not an option because you would be visible anyway. He was gone. I slightly turned my head to that direction when I captured something right behind me. A stick man. It was absolutely black, around my height, maybe a bit taller. 190 centimeters or so. Very thin, but with a big head, no neck at all. It was standing in a very threatening position, with its arms set apart like an animal preparing to attack. This figure looked like a puncture printed straight on the air. I thought that 2D objects should be material at some point, with the thickness of a sheet of paper, for example. But no, this looked entirely different. I turned my head away and started running to the second level of the road. When I got there, I looked back. This thing was peeking out of a tree, and when I spotted it, it got behind it, hiding. At this point, I really thought that I was going to die, for sure. When I got to the third level, some cars were driving nearby, so it calmed me down a little. I looked back again. The stickman was standing in the spot where I was seconds ago, right in the middle of the road. The whole landscape looked so unreal that at some point I questioned my sanity. This time I kept the contact and tried to examine this thing. The stickman was slightly moving back and forth, but its whole body had a very stable, dark black figure. And it also needs to be mentioned the feeling I got. I watched the Beyond Creepy videos, and some people that saw something similar claimed to have a "you shouldn't see this" feeling. I got something like that as well. And the survival instincts were blurred, but my mind kept telling me to flee. Also, I felt like, finally you found me. Imagine when you play hide and seek and your cousin is very slow finding anybody. So you sit in your place for a long 20 minutes. At first you feel the pleasure of the game, but later it gets boring. So when the cousin finally finds you, you feel some kind of relief. I think that something tried to stop me from walking away because at some point there was a little desire to approach this thing and to become friends. It was obvious that it was following me, and the thing is, I lived very close to that place. I didn't know what to do. Either to wander through the streets so it would lose me or go directly home. But this thing would know where I lived. I decided to run to safety immediately without looking back. And yeah, it's not the end. That night I had sleep paralysis. I remember laying in bed listening to the sound of water from my aquarium when it suddenly stopped. I thought that somebody was trying to get my attention, so I opened my eyes. Right next to the bed there was the same black figure. This was it, the end of my life. I literally saw my entire 17 years before my eyes. This figure just stood 3 feet away from me, and then it turned into a fog and started to fill my lungs through my nose and throat. When it was entirely inside my body, I woke up. Or I didn't sleep at all, I don't know. Thing is, I haven't noticed any difference with myself since. The whole encounter was very different from anything I've seen in my life. There are things you've never experienced before, so you don't actually know what to think or to feel, and you're filled with curiosity. I'm low-key disturbed because why would I find myself one day in the middle of nowhere, approaching a random person with skis on, and disappearing the next moment? Did that dream mean anything, or was it a dream? I barely remember that man's face, so it's pointless to search for lost people, I guess. And is it inside me, waiting for something? I don't really know what to think about this. 3. So I was driving up Highway 3 in Kitsap County, Washington. I knew this road stupidly well. Back then I'd drive up it towards Port Campbell and the Hood Canal Bridge daily. I'm not sure of my age at the time, but I was at least 19, which means it was probably around early 2008 or late 2007. It was about 8 p.m, but was winter, so it was pitch black. As usual, it was overcast but not raining. I was borrowing my grandmother's car to pick up my little sister from a youth group. This happened weekly, so it was nothing new, it's just how schedules worked. As I was heading north, a couple miles from the Hood Canal Bridge, there's a steep incline on the right side of the road from when they regraded the old road for the highway. And because this was rural Washington, all the small dirt roads leading off into private and non-private roads had those big reflectors near the road to keep people from drifting into mailboxes, and to be able to identify the correct road when visiting people. But I noticed what I thought was a new reflector, 2 big red orbs reasonably far apart. What shocked me is when it moved, like those red orbs were attached to a creature, and seemed to kind of lurch to the side and rise up to twice its previous height. Kind of as if a man was sitting next to the road with these giant reflectors on wires extending out from the sides of his head. And he decided to stand up. It did a similar sort of lurch. As I hit my headlights, I noticed a few things. It was furred. I couldn't tell any details. I don't know if you've ever caught a very thin-coated but dark-furred animal in your headlights, but they get kind of a glow outline rather than you able to see a lot of details until they are kind of totally illuminated in the headlights. But this outline was almost human-like. The problem was it was big. Like about 8 to 12 feet tall. I couldn't make out any details, partially because of the contrast from the reflectors, which I could never quite interpret his eyes. It honestly struck me more like light catching somethings between a deer's antlers, by how far apart they were. Then it rose up and quickly disappeared into the bush. And that's what was weird. As I mentioned earlier, there are very steep embankments on the side of the road there, and they're covered in thick foliage. Even deer avoid it. And it was the way it moved. I remember seeing the outline of the legs, almost human-like, move like they just walked backwards up a hill and into the bush. The reflectors didn't turn off me. The eyes, the movements were just like it was casually walking backward up the hill. Kind of the same kind of movements. If you've ever seen someone like walk down a stairwell, pause, look at you, and then walk back up without turning around. Now, I've seen a couple of odd things. I won't say paranormal things because I don't know. But this was the first time I felt like I encountered something I shouldn't have. There's always been chatter among locals out here in this part of North Kitsap that there's lots of unrightness in the woods. But this wasn't just unnerving, it kind of made me feel sick. About an hour and a half later, after I was returning from picking up my sister, I was so stressed and unable to focus thinking of the encounter. I scraped my grandmother's car against one of those barriers they put near the chasms on the side of the road. The reason for the name is when I went to investigate. I actually went to briefly investigate that very night, but didn't want to go into the gloomy woods to look for tracks. So I just stood in the mud next to the road. I found deer tracks that night, or at least deer-like tracks on the side of the road, but they seemed to not follow the path it took. So I went home to wait till morning. When I went out the next morning, I checked the area. The deer tracks were obviously just from a deer that had walked along the side of the highway to avoid the steep incline and were pretty old. I checked the bushes but found nothing, and the loose dirt was the kind of thing that if you stepped on it, your leg would slide down a good foot before it found ground. Soft loam, yet there was nothing in those bushes I could find. I went up a nearby road and tried to find anything, and all I found was a ton of llamas in a pasture. Not odd, we have a strange amount of llama farmers. The llamas were also of a ridiculous color pattern that made them look like they had skulls on their faces and bony limbs, with a dark body but white facial features with a brown nose and mask, white socks but dark reddish-brown bodies. The kind of color pattern that would have freaked me out if I had come upon it in the dark. But it wouldn't have looked remotely the same. It would have looked like a floating skull. This actually happened to me once in my childhood, and scared the bejeebas out of me until I realized it was just a llama. Simply put, They were all behind a tall fence, and none of them had a color pattern that was all dark. I asked the people as I knew them vaguely, and they not only said no llamas went missing, no one's llama in general went missing. The llama people were all kind of friends. Moreover, no one had near black llamas this side of Big Valley, and that's much too far away. The name of this story, Llama King, came from this conversation that if it was a llama, it was some kind of magical llama king. Angry, its subjects were encaged. The name stuck with me and my friends because, honestly, it was kind of funny and helped lighten the fear. I don't know what it was or what it could have been. In all honesty, it still haunted me to this day, and I tend to occasionally inspect the forest with a rifle in hand, when I get a feeling near the unnerve I felt that day. Despite the name, I always felt it was more of a deer man than a llama man. It actually reminded me of what the local Royal Rangers, a fundamentalist Christian Boy Scout derivative, Snipe Hunt Snipe, was supposed to look like, which I was told was a deer with human hands and red eyes. But that connection never really occurred to me until someone I was talking to didn't know what a snipe hunt was. 4. My grandmother met my grandfather when they were in high school, became high school sweethearts, wrote letters to each other when my grandfather was deployed in World War II, and eventually married. In the 1950s, they moved into a tiny 2-bedroom, 900-square-foot house in Oklahoma that was built in the 1930s. I don't know if it was due to their values or if later in life there was a strain in their relationship, but they each slept in different bedrooms. I never met my grandfather. He passed away before I was born. My grandmother never remarried, just continued to live in this house until she passed away in 2009. She always left my grandfather's room the way it was when he was alive. Before she passed away, she sold her house to my brother, who had just recently married his wife. When my brother moved in, he began to remodel the house, and that's when he began to experience a few weird things. My brother was an entrepreneur and started a private security business. He ended up converting my grandfather's bedroom into an office. My brother began telling his wife that when he would walk out of the office and into the hallway, he would hear a growling sound just over his shoulder. She thought my brother was just trying to scare her, and then she began to hear the growling sound too. One day, while sitting at his office desk, he felt like someone was leaning on his office chair, leaning it back. All of a sudden, the whole chair moved forward while he was still being leaned back, causing him to hit his elbow on the desk and bruising it badly. Another day, he and his wife were sitting in the front room watching TV, when he heard 2 of his 3 cats start growling. They were looking towards the office with their hair standing on end. They heard a crashing noise, and the 3rd cat came sprinting out of the office into the front room, where it stopped and looked back into the office. Then the computer mouse came flying out of the room, just missing the cat. The worst thing that happened was one very late night in August, about 2 a.m., my brother gets a call from one of his employees. He takes the call to his office to conduct business, and while trying to talk to the employee states, "I'm sorry, I don't know if that's your wife talking, but I'm having a hard time hearing you." My brother informs him that his wife is asleep, and it is just him in the office. Right after he says this, my brother hears our mom's voice coming from the front door saying, "Hello, hello." My brother tells his employee, "I have to call you back, my mom is here. She lives an hour and a half away, it's not like her to be here." He goes to the front door and no one is there. My brother goes outside, no car, no one around. He says it's unusually cold, he can see his breath condensate. He turns and looks into his front room through the window, and he sees a woman, dressed all in white, walk from the front office, through his front room, into his kitchen, and out into his garage. He says he immediately has an overwhelming sense of sadness come over him, and he begins to cry uncontrollably. He rushes inside to wake up his wife, who tells him to leave her alone, but after a few attempts she wakes up and asks, "What's wrong?" Before he can explain, there are multiple loud crashes coming from the garage. My brother tells her they need to leave right now. They go and drive around for an hour or so talking about what happened. They also call me and tell me what happened. At first I think it's a prank, but my brother is always serious. Never religious and doesn't believe in anything supernatural. They head back home to find their garage in shambles. After these events, years go by with no other incident. My brother had a daughter and he converted the office into a bedroom for her. He walks by her room one day when she's laying down for a nap, and he hears what sounds like a man talking in her room. Popping sound and her crying. After going into the room, the electrical outlet near her crib is sparking and singed. She is 4 years old now, and nothing else has happened since that incident. Although I have house-watched for him, I haven't personally experienced anything that I can say is paranormal. Closest thing that I can say is I woke up with a feeling like something heavy was on my legs, like a cat. But none of them were around. I remember seeing a dark shadow that looked like a person moving away from the foot of the bed once I woke up. But maybe it was just my eyes adjusting. 5. Okay, so I'm going to preface this with the fact that I was a bit of a skeptic. I love the idea of the paranormal, but straight up never believed it until about half an hour ago. I was walking my dog along his usual route. It's only a half-hour circuit through a well-lit and safe neighborhood, so I feel pretty comfortable taking him late at night. I'm about 20 minutes into the walk when I notice the only other person I've seen the entire time I've been out. A kid of roughly 9 or 10 walking alone on the other side of the street. This strikes me as odd as it's nearly midnight, but I decide it's none of my business and press on. Then the kid notices me and crosses the road. This is where I get my first proper look at it. They're wearing a thin hoodie, green and grey striped with the hood up, grey cargo pants and a pair of trainers. Totally normal attire, really. As the kid walked over, I felt compelled to stop. There's a lot of young families living in the area, so I assumed they belonged to one of them. But I felt weirdly uneasy. I'm someone who really struggles with generalized anxiety, and so chalked it up to that initially. They reached me and took down their hood, and that's when I started to actually freak out. Their face was totally androgynous and kind of rubbery, topped off with blacked-out eyes. It sounds cliché as hell, but everything about their appearance was just wrong. In hindsight, I'm pretty sure that it was unnatural symmetry that threw me off as much as the eyes, but I can't honestly say that for sure as the image seems to evade clear memory. I must have stared at the kid blankly for a beat before it said something pretty close to, "Excuse me, sir, but my friend and I are going to the shop, and we appear to have lost our way. Could you please direct us at your convenience?" 1. I'm a girl, so thanks, demon kid. 2. I text these words to my girlfriend almost immediately afterwards so I can be fairly sure of the accuracy. 3. There was only one kid that I saw, but can't rule out a second being there. 4. There were no shops anywhere near where we were. It wasn't just the factual errors that threw me off, but the tone too. It was kind of mechanical and kind of awkward. Almost like if you read a Dr. Seuss book. That's what it reminded me of anyway. For some weird reason, I felt like the kid wanted to come with me. As it said these words, it kind of leaned into the direction that I had been walking in. I know it had asked for directions, but I can't help but feel that the next step would have been asking me to walk it there, or even worse, asking to come home with me to call someone as it was lost. I told it that I couldn't be of any help, and it frowned at me and went to open its mouth. But whatever weird compulsion that had caused me to stop broke, and I made to walk home. After a few steps, I turned to look back, and the kid was gone. Like I say, I'm not one to jump to paranormal conclusions quickly, and in a slightly older kid, I might have assumed blackout contacts, as I have them myself, but everything about this thing was just unnerving. I can't explain why I know with such conviction that what I saw wasn't human, but either way I know it. I won't be walking that route anymore, and certainly not after dark. If you can offer a logical explanation, then please do, because I'm pretty sure I'm just crazy. Update. I went back to the site of the encounter. Okay, so first of all, thank you for everyone who commented and pointed me in the direction of black-eyed children. These things are horrific, and if I ever see one again, I'll personally fight it. I think I can take a 9-year-old. Demon, vampire, alien, or not. Anyway, tonight I went back to the spot where I saw it. I'm a scientific person, former med student, and so decided that I was going to make an experiment of it. My thinking was that I can't spend my life being scared of a stretch of road, and besides, my research showed that they tend to need your permission, so I guess just don't invite them to hang with you, and you'll be fine. I made sure that everything was the same as before. dressed in the same clothes, put the same harness on the dog, and set off at exactly 11:15 p.m. So it would be around 11:35 by the time I got to that particular street. Once I got there, I took a picture of where I had first seen the thing, and sent that to my girlfriend just so I had a record of it and headed home. Nothing. However, since I got my dog home, he has been freaking out at the door. At first I was irritated because we've just been out and he's already wanted to go again. But every time I opened the door, he would step outside for a second, then come back in, then repeat. Hopefully I'm just being paranoid and he's trying to wind me up. But now this is interfering with me eating my beans on toast. So if there's a black-eyed kid outside, it's on thin ice. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 141. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. And of course, just as I'm done recording, all the noise outside stops. Well, I should hope so, it's 10 to 11 at night. Plus side, I have been editing my audio as I went tonight, just to make sure to give myself a little break in between, give things time to quiet down. So that means I'm pretty much done after I edit, well, done with the audio prep after I edit this outro. Let's see, what day will this goes up on Friday, and that will be, the 31st. That means Good Omens should be up on Amazon Prime in the UK. Not sure where it will be locally. I think it's Prime worldwide, apart from America? I'm not sure. Let's look up. I can always edit the long pause out. Good Omens. All 6 episodes are set to be released on May 31st, 2019 on Amazon Prime Video. Okay, so it looks like it might be worldwide. For those of you who don't have Amazon, you can get them in the UK about 6 months after. So probably about Christmas time. A nice little treat at Christmas, won't it? Right, well, I've got my bi-weekly trip down to the hospital tomorrow to deal with nurses who keep telling me different things and frowning, and I don't like... Okay, calm down, be nice, they're only trying to help in their way. Be nice, be nice. Anyway, down there to let them check my progress, not much, and to pick up presumably the next dose of this coal tar treatment. I believe that'll be up to 30% now, which I think is the strongest dose, so hopefully when I'm on the strongest dose it'll start kicking in. I mean, there's some very, very minor improvement I've noticed. Very minor. So minor. But we'll see how it goes. Grumble, grumble, grumble. Okay, with that I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.